The lights flicker in the office, emails pile up, meetings drag on, and no matter what you do, the same old leadership habits keep crawling back like the undead. These aren't monsters from a horror movie, they're zombie leaders, haunting workplaces, stifling innovation, and leaving teams drained and disoriented. Welcome to Honest HR, where we turn the scary issues facing today's HR departments into honest conversations with actionable insights. I'm your host, Nicole Belina. Let's get honest. Today, we'll unpack how zombie leadership infects organizations with outdated practices that refuse to die, and the chilling toll it takes on culture, morale, and innovation. Plus, to keep with the spooky theme of today, we'll share some real HR horror stories from you, our audience, anonymous, jaw-dropping moments from the workplace. Joining us is Alex Haslam, professor of psychology at the University of Queensland in Australia and co-author of the research study Zombie Leadership: Dead Ideas That Still Walk Among Us. Welcome to Honest HR, Alex.
Hi, Nicole. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. So start us off at the beginning. Since you and some of your research colleagues coined the term, what exactly is zombie leadership?
Zombie leadership just refers to the fact that in the sort of leadership landscape, in the world of leadership, there's a way of talking about leadership, a way of thinking about leadership, a kind of way of doing leadership that's informed by a broad set of ideas that have been very, very influential for best part of 200 years, but that in the sort of scientific literature around leadership have been shown to be faulty, shown to be wrong. So these ideas are wrong. They've been refuted. They've been rebutted again and again, but yet they live on in the way that we talk about leadership. And my colleagues and I basically, we're getting on a bit. And we just got a bit tired of keep saying, look, no, this idea is wrong. We've moved beyond, the field has moved beyond that. No, we've moved beyond that. But these they come back again and again and again. So they're just these ideas about leadership that it seems impossible to extinguish, impossible to move on from. So it is like the realm of the living dead. And that was really kind of what led us to invoke that image and to coin the term, really to bring attention to the phenomenon too, because I think everybody kind of knows what zombies are, and it's a fairly basic kind of way of talking about this phenomenon. And I think a lot of the time in the scientific literature, we talk about things in relatively rarefied, abstruse ways that people can't really tap into. So in this instance, we're really just trying to get the message across as clearly as possible.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about it. According to research from SHRM, poor leadership is ranked as one of the top drivers of workplace stress. What are the most damaging effects zombie leadership has on workplace culture?
Well, it's really across the board, right? So if you're interested in leadership or just organizational behavior generally, there's two core dimensions to that, right? And what we look for in organizational contexts, we look for something to do with sort of productivity or something that feeds into it, whether that's motivation or communication or something of that form, and also well-being. So those two things are what you're trying to achieve in organizations. You're trying to get things done, and you're trying to get them done in a way that people feel good about. Well, zombie leadership is death to both of those things. It undermines productivity, and as you said, it's incredibly stressful. So having a leader who is kind of locked into this old way of thinking, which is all about them and not about you and not about the relationship between you, is at best is exhausting, at worst is demoralizing and utterly destructive of your relationship. So again, an awful lot of people move away from the workplace or leave an organization or just report feeling very stressed because of poor leadership. But it takes this very specific form, I think, of leadership that is about me and not about us. And again, the literature is very clear that leadership only works when it's helping to build relationships, but actually zombie leadership is ignorant of and destructive of relationships.
There you go. So it's those old concepts of, it's all about me, the leader, rather than, leadership as a collective of individuals, as a
Correct.
collective effort.
Yeah, so in a way, it goes back to the 1800s, 1840 type thing, and the dawn of the great man. The idea the leader is the great man. We're talking about men typically in the past, at least. What I say as a man, I'm the top dog here, and your job is just to lap it up and do what I say. So a sort of command and control model. Well, the problems of that have been identified for, as I say, decades. Um, and actually, leadership is a group process. It's about building connections with one's team so that they're mobilized to kind of act in the interests of us. If you cultivate the idea that it's all about me, well, that's very disengaging for your team members. It's very, as I said, alienating, off-putting, okay, and actually makes them very reluctant to put their shoulder to the wheel, not least because they don't see what's in it for us. They don't see what's this, how's this working for us? I can see how it's working for you, but it's not doing anything for us. And again, leadership that does nothing for us is useless for us. Indeed, more to the point, right, just definitionally, leadership is only proved by what other people do. So without followership, there is no leadership. But if your leadership kills followership, then it can't be leadership. You might have a fantastic CV. You might be able to tell people about all the wonderful things that you've done, but that isn't leadership.
So it's a vicious cycle, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and often it's one that's reinforced or perpetuated, sometimes deliberately in organizations because they think that's what they're meant to be doing, or someone has the idea that's what leadership looks like. But I think often inadvertently it's just sort of built in or baked into the way we sort of do HR and other types of things. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So you touched on, zombie leadership can be damaging to morale. We talked about the impact that it can have on workplace stress. What about its impact on business ROI?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's just the flow through from those things. If your workers, if your employees, if your workforce are unhappy and unproductive, well, it's going to be a strange sort of business that's doing very well under those circumstances.
Yeah.
I mean, how that manifests I think, is varied. But I think things like turnover and disengagement are the things that kill organizations. The things that make organizations succeed are buy-in and collaborative effort and collective effort. That doesn't translate straightforwardly into a return on investment. But again, if you're blind to these things, or indeed if you're inadvertently or overtly cultivating them, then you're going to have a problem. And when that's going to really hit you in the face, who knows? But really, we are talking about, ideas for sort of, 50 years ago, the sort of was the sort of, I guess, the sort of heyday of zombie leadership. And I don't think smart practice in business is anywhere kind of near it. But the power of zombie leadership is it isn't just something that's part of discourse in business context. It's pretty much whenever we talk about anything to do with group behavior, we often, if you watch sport on telly or whatever, you're going to have some analysis of the match and the team's won, and then they're going to try to explain it in terms of the activities of one or a small number of sort of leaders or individuals, and suggest that these stars were sort of responsible for the team's output. And we do lots of things to idolize and lionize individuals in group context, and to somehow suggest that group performance is all about the inputs of kind of individuals. And that really goes sort of across the board. I in the paper, I think, and elsewhere, I sometimes make the point, the first book my parents ever gave me was Alexander the Great. It was a little ladybird book. I don't know if you know what that is. But anyway, and basically that said that Alexander the Great did all these wonderful things. He conquered Mesopotamia and he did this and that and the other. Well, the obvious point is that he really didn't do those things. That a lot of people did those things in his name and made him the great. But if he hadn't had all those people doing those things, then there would be no Ladybird book on it. But nevertheless, we tell stories about group performance, stories about history that suggest that it's all about the activities of individuals, or select individuals. And actually, in reality, yeah, they're incredibly important. What those people who are in positions of leadership do, but it's their ability to make this about us and make this a collective effort that it makes history of a form that we recognize and celebrate.
Yes. In your research, you describe zombie leadership as a hydra. You cut off one head, another grows back. So, what does that look like in day-to-day organizations?
Well, I mean, it's a sort of, often I think these things can be a bit of a revolving door. So you might have a selection procedure, you might have a way of identifying and recognizing and elevating particular people through the ranks of your organization, and they get to the top, and then maybe that doesn't go as you like, and there's a problem, and then you say, let's do it all again. I mean, and you don't actually interrogate the systems which are sort of producing some of these problematic outcomes. So and in our research, one of the things we talk about quite a lot is the way in which organizational activity and can encourage and amplify narcissism on the part of leaders. Now, in psychology, often people talk about leadership, talk about narcissism as if it was just a static personal attribute or trait. You're either a narcissist or you aren't. But actually, the reality is narcissism is something that's cultivated, and people will be more or less narcissistic as a function of the organizational context in which they're operating. And also, of course, they will be attracted to contexts which either fuel their narcissism or fuel some other set of values and sort of attributes. And again, if you're not careful, the way that you're doing leadership, the way you're selecting for it, the way you're recruiting for it, will encourage those narcissists or the sort of people who want to behave in toxic ways to assume positions of leadership, and also draw other people like them to your leadership positions. Now, that's obviously, unless you do something at a sort of more systemic level, more in terms of your operations to address that, it's just going to recur. And I think there's plenty of evidence of that. And often when people talk about sort of toxic culture, what they're really talking about are systems that are blind to these dynamics.
Yeah, I also think about certain metrics that organizations put in place that can perhaps lead to those bad behaviors as well.
Absolutely. And I think HR policy, I mean, again, often you have kind of reporting and you have appraisal kind of processes, which are all about singling you out as an individual. I know our HR system, which I really loathe, spits out this whopping great big report, and it's 100 pages, and it's all about you, and it's all about where you are in comparison to everybody else in your unit, and it's like, well, half of those people are my friends and colleagues, and how come we don't operate as little individuals who are competing with each other? That's not what we're doing, and I find it insulting that you imagine that somehow that's going to be motivating for me, because it absolutely isn't.
So, seeing these patterns play out in daily organizations, the reoccurring mistakes, the resistance to change, the old habits that resurface despite intervention, brings up some tough questions for HR teams. So, if zombie leadership refuses to die, does that mean HR's methods of leadership training and development are failing, presenting the same old ideas with new packaging, repackaging, instead of actually changing the core practices?
Look, I think that's the big question in a way, isn't it? Like, are people going to look at this and say, yeah, okay, look, there's something here that we need to really think about? I think the answer is it's not. I think smart HR, and there's smart HR everywhere, is attuned to these things. But I don't think I think where the sort of ballast is, if you like, in the HR spectrum, I think is sort of fixated in the wrong place. And I do sense there's a reluctance to engage with these ideas for a range of reasons. I think often, to do with organizational politics, like the chief at the top, they quite like doing that this way because it makes them feel good and they're our boss, so we should do what they say. And people in HR often are trying to do things, for fairly obvious reasons that keep the boss sort of happy. Well, if the boss wants zombie leadership because it makes them feel good, because, they're not getting any respect at home, or the kids, whatever, they're coming to work to get all their, respect, well, then it's going to be a problem. But again, I think the job of HR is to, look at the data, look at how practices can be improved, and look at what's going on in the literature, what the very clear messages are, and to find ways to challenge that. And again, as someone who's kind of like engaging a lot with people kind of, I guess, around the world in this space, what you see is, you can see that some people are really, really receptive to this and really say, yeah, this is right. We need to call this out and we need to be attuned to this in what we're doing.
And you shared earlier in our conversation that it is unlikely that you'll see zombie leadership behaviors, actions, and that are yielding great business results. And so, certainly you can start there. And then you talked about looking at other data as well.
Absolutely. And again, I think if you asked a question like kind of what's the number one thing that you can do, and I think the number one thing is call this out and give it a name. That's what we were trying to say. And then have a discussion around it and find those people who say, yeah, that's right, this is the problem here. And then sit down and say, yeah, and what does that mean for us? And where does the path forward lie? And again, that's really the single goal of this paper, which, again, we designed to be read and we designed to be communicated, was look, there's something here. For far too long, we have sort of, danced around it and we've sort of pretended this isn't a thing, but it's a constellation of ways of thinking, ways of operating that is really problematic. And I think giving it a name is really the first step. But I think how you then set about dealing with it is a very organization specific question. But I think there are some really sort of key pointers along the lines of the discussion that we've been having.
What can HR teams do when there's zombie leaders in their organization who are toxic to their teams? We've talked about this, everybody knows it, and yet somehow they are still respected and valued by members of the C-suite.
Well, I think one thing is don't just pathologize it by imagining it's all about those individuals. Recognize that the systems that we're creating, we're running, we're maintaining are also potentially contributing to that. And while you may not be able, for structural reasons and other kinds of reasons, you may not be able to do anything about this one instance of a person. I mean, you can do something. You can seek some sort of legal redress, or you can seek to get them removed or something of that form. But these things are long and painful and they're not always very effective. Or you can sit down and say, look, there's something wrong here. What was it about our recruitment procedures which led us to appoint someone like this or to promote someone like this? And often there are answers in those things. And I think then you say, well, look, we need to do this differently. We obviously weren't getting the good oil on this person when we appointed them. So why was that? Why were we? And also, again, not to pathologize, what is it about our systems that made this person the way that they turned out to be? Because by all accounts, they were more reasonable when they were, in this other place or when they were in a more junior position, but they seem to have been turned into this character, this rampant toxic narcissist or whatever it is, by the environment that we've created. So let's interrogate that, let's re-engineer that, and let's do everything that we possibly can to avoid repeating those mistakes in the future. I think the problem, or one of the problems, is that one of the consequences of zombie leadership is that actually often your best HR people will leave because they don't want to be part of those systems. So often they're perpetuated by a rather sort of laissez-faire and uncritical HR apparatus of people who are just happy to go with the flow and say, well, that's how we do things here. That's how we've always done it, and to just invoke some debunked ideas about personality or something that they learned on the back of a cornflakes packet.
Yeah. And I just wanted to go back, we touched on looking at the data, and for HR teams, I think when they see these zombie leadership qualities, rear their ugly heads in their organizations, I think going back to the data can really speak volumes, especially if you're trying to get the attention of the C-suite, looking at things like, as you said, going back to the recruiting process, like, what did we miss here in the recruiting process that we could improve? Right? Looking at those systems, looking at the leaders, engagement survey results, their business results, their turnover, retention, those things when you put them together, they certainly tell a story, even if you've never witnessed the behaviors that you're hearing from your employees.
Absolutely, yeah. Actually, another colleague of mine, Tyree Mitchell, who's at the LSU in Louisiana, and we've just got a paper out, which is the title of it is Human resources or human me-sources. And basically the point there is that actually, we talk about human resources as a generic thing, but actually often those things are really about zeroing in on the we, or they're about zeroing in on the me. And actually what you see in a lot of contexts is if you only focus on that me bit of it, the story, it's a problem. And I think and in that paper, we basically say, look, as in the field of HR, you need to be much more attuned to the register in which these practices are operating. And I think that's something that sort of anybody can do. I think, unfortunately, again, lots of the big kind of HR systems that one has, the kinds of things that organizations have, they're very, very poor at identifying team dynamics and capturing the reality of psychological groups in organizations. If they do something about groups, often very mechanical. It's not doing justice to the more sort of organic ways in which groups and teams operate in organizations. And again, that's a bit of a kind of beef of ours. So you either have the individual or you have the whole department, but that's not how organizations work. You have little nested units of people who work together on projects or have shared interests around this, and it's all much, much more organic. And that's where the creativity in organizations is absolutely centered in those team group dynamics. It's never just at the level of the organization or just at the level of the individual, but we create these bureaucratic fictions and then we instantiate those in these very expensive HR systems that do violence to that reality, and not only do violence to it, in many instances actually destroy it.
Well, thank you, Alex, for sharing your insights with us today. We could talk about this topic all day for sure.
Yeah, we absolutely could. Yeah, well, but thanks for having me along. And to the audience, happy Halloween.
We've explored zombie leadership from several angles today. But to keep with our spooky theme, we want to bring you something special, maybe even a little scary. That's why we're sharing some real HR horror stories, anonymous stories from you, our audience, about workplace moments that just make your mouth drop. Check it out. When HR says you can't make this stuff up, they mean it. We asked for some real life HR horror stories, and let's just say we got some unforgettable ones. Joining me to read some of the ones that stood out is my fellow Honest HR host, Monica Conby, and Peyton Kirby, lead of talent and employee experience here at SHRM. Thanks for joining me, you two.
Hey, Nicole. Happy to be here.
Okay, so we're each going to read 2 stories out loud. Some of these will make you laugh, some of them will make you gag, and a few might make you want to update your HR policies immediately. So I will kick us off with the first entry. All right, here we go. So Two guys got in a fight at the time clock while waiting to punch out. Why? One of them passed gas, thinking it wasn't going to stink. So if you think the movie Step Brothers, if you know, you know. It was so bad that it made the other guy sick. And that's when the fight broke out.
Like they started fighting, physically fighting?
Yeah, physically fighting. I guess,
Is it like hockey rules where you wait till someone's on the ground before you intervene? Or I wouldn't want to be HR for one, because both would be terminated. Me thinking about, workplace violence and, having zero tolerance for that.
yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. There's no room for fighting, physical altercations at work, regardless of how silly the topic may have been or the activity, I guess, that may have started it, right? So
those violent ones are the most deadly ones. So sorry. Well, I got one for you. An employee bought a 6-pack of O'Doul's, which is a non-alcoholic beer, to work and was drinking at his desk. When confronted, he told the HR person that he didn't understand what the issue was. Thoughts? That's some crazy behavior. That's so unnecessary. Well, it is non-alcoholic. It's not alcoholic, but soda is an option if you're looking for a carbonated beverage. You know what? I would agree, Peyton. He's like, you were wanting attention. The perception of it all, whether it's non-alcoholic or not, the perception is that it appears to be he's drinking an alcoholic drink. So, I mean, I would definitely address it.
next time, have a Shirley Temple.
Well, it was the busiest hiring event of the season, and I had to send a company-wide email that said, "Hello, everyone, we're hiring. If you know of anyone in need of employment, have them reach out." I was horrified when my coworker responded, "Who are we firing?" When I read back the email, I did in fact send out a company-wide email that said, "We're firing. If you know anyone in need of employment." Needless to say, I still get asked, "Who are we firing today?" I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Oh, that's a horror story. Oh my gosh. And that's a mistake that I would probably make out of all of these. Well, you know what? That's why read aloud is my best friend.
Well, and always have, use spell check and always have someone else give your emails a quick glance before you send out all company emails.
That's why I use the read aloud, because then hearing it back, because firing, it's in right context, but yeah, spell check would not have caught that. No.
Yeah, that's a major typo, particularly when you're an HR person, right?
Very different activities.
Yeah. In the land of opposites, maybe. Well, for some reason, I have all of the bathroom stories today. So,
Nicole.
Let me share another one. Yeah.
Having a poopy day, right?
Yes, I know. Let's see. I had an employee have diarrhea from their desk to the bathroom. Oh my. The trail was at least 20 feet long.
Oh, stop. Stop. A trail? Stop.
Once I realized what was on the rug, I opened the bathroom door to see the trail go right into the stall. All I could do was put paper plates on the trail until the rug cleaners came hours later.
Oh my God. Oh, I might evacuate the office. That's a hazard.
It is.
That's great hazard pay if I have to live work in that. Oh.
Yes, that is when you enlist your peers in facilities and admin services, and definitely evacuate the floor, if not the building.
Yeah.
Yikes.
That brings a new meaning to just HR. Lord, what do we have to deal with? The human part of humans. Some of them have to laugh to keep from crying. So I can definitely relate to that. Well, talk about standing by your woman. The CEO and I determined it was time to part ways with our assistant director of nursing. We offered her the option to resign, and during the conversation, she called her husband, who was our maintenance director, and told him that she was being fired. Within minutes, he entered the room visibly upset and stated that if we fired her, he would resign as well. What began as one termination ultimately resulted in 2 resignations. Later, we received an email in which she apologized for what happened. They came to their senses is what happened, and asked if her husband could be reinstated. She was like, "Look, both of us can't be without a job." We indicated that reemployment might be possible, but not in the HR and not in the nursing director role. And he ultimately declined. Thoughts? Would you reinstate him?
Oh my goodness. Who writes an email on behalf of their spouse asking for their job back?
Well, who resigns because their spouse is being terminated?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, there's that too.
And who doesn't talk about the possibility of that in advance? I've hired a number of spouses before, and that's always a risk, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if I would be inclined to reinstate his employment, just because if you act that erratic, like it just, emotionally, I would just be concerned moving forward with how you would react and respond to certain situations. So I probably wouldn't. I would just respectfully, accept his resignation and keep it moving.
Yeah, I mean, we appreciate that you're trying to support your spouse. However, I mean, the conduct is the conduct. And so I agree. I would be concerned going forward.
Yeah. Well, speaking of poor judgment, I've got another one for us.
Uh-oh.
Our company provides care to people in their homes. One of our employees reported that 2 of her coworkers were making out in the backyard and a third person was filming it. During our investigation into the incident, we learned all of the staff members in that house were taking turns sleeping with each other at work and filming it. Turns out the employee who reported it was part of this love quadrangle, and her husband had found a video on her phone of a makeout session of 2 people on top of a washing machine and confronted her. She claimed she was only filming them so she could go to HR with evidence. It was ultimately revealed that there was video footage of her getting freaky with other people in the house, and she asked to end the investigation. All employees involved were terminated.
Oh yeah, start all over.
Yeah. Yeah, you need a blank slate in that house. We need to stage that house, actually.
Clean slate, yes.
Oh my gosh.
But I mean, here's my thing. I'm quite sure, and being in HR, right? We go through orientation, we provide training, we reinforce what our expectations are. At what point does employees just forget? I don't know. Nothing surprises me anymore.
Well, and I would hope that's not an expectation you need to outwardly reinforce. I think that one should be assumed.
Yeah, but you know what I learned? Peyton, common sense isn't common. So
no, it is not.
Right.
Yeah, no, it is not. We are always designing for the lowest common denominator on the policy front.
Yeah.
So
that's exactly right. I mean, many policies are written because, it just takes one incident, right? So,
yeah, I used to have a list of rules for, interviews and what's compliant and what's best practice. And some of them I would tell folks, these might sound common sense or they might sound a little ridiculous, but there's a real reason for everything on this slide.
All right. Well, goodness, these stories are a good reminder that no amount of HR training can prepare you for everything or anything. And if you've got a good HR horror story of your own, big or small, we would love to hear it. If you're watching, click on the link above or find the form, which is linked in the episode description.
Hello, friends. We hope this week's episode gave you the candid tips and insights you need to keep growing and thriving in your career. Honest HR is part of HR Daily, the content series from SHRM that delivers a daily newsletter directly to your inbox, filled with all the latest HR news and research. Sign up at shrm.org/HR Daily, plus follow SHRM on social media for even more clips and stories. Like, share, and add to the comments. Because real change starts with real talk.
SHRM.
This podcast is approved for 0.5 professional development credits, aka PDCs, toward SHRM CP and SHRM SCP recertification. Enter the following PDC activity ID in your SHRM activity portal to log your credit. 26-GF5RA. That's 26-GF5RA. This ID expires on November 1st, 2026.